Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh McDonald, Gordon Parks and Alison McConnell are here with me. Thank you to you for your support over the course of the season. There's lots more to come as far as programming is concerned on our YouTube channel and right across our social media. And if you download the app, you'll get all the breaking news at your fingertips. And more importantly, all the content that we're giving you is absolutely free. If you want additional content, lots of unique stuff, we're offering it on PLZ Premium. You can follow the link on our YouTube channel and subscribe to that too. But there's lots of stuff coming up in the new season to look forward to. Lots to talk about. Of course, we love our football. We certainly love it when you sit down. Somebody sent me a text and said, I've got friends over, we've got the television on, and we're going to sit down and we're going to have a right good night watching Ayr United against Partick Thistle. To which I then replied, are you off your head? Get the friends out and get Inter Barcelona off. I shouldn't probably say that because somebody will jump on my head and say I thought you were sporting Scottish football, but there are some times, Hugh, when you have to draw a line.
Could be worse. It could have been at Partick Thistle. Well, not terrific game. I think we kind of briefly touched on it last week. This has been a vintage Champions League.
Yeah.
I mean, they just great knockout games, people interested in the whole process, etc., etc. But last night was, I mean, I just see what I thought when I was just watching it. You know, and the cake, by the way, is for my 70th birthday.
Yes, I was going to say, in case people watch, I was going to leave it there and then get people really stimulated by the thought, why is there a cake sitting there? We'll get to that.
I just thought I'd mention it before I pass away, you know.
Yes.
And I was just sitting at 70 years of age watching that game, and I went to myself, I just love football.
Yeah.
You know that way, you just see, is there anything better than just sitting down watching a great football match? And the whole thing compounded, I think, by at one point being sure that at half time Inter are going to and then 20 minutes, 30 minutes later saying, no, I'm sure it's Barca are going to kind of stroll us at one point. So absolutely terrific stuff.
Yeah, great to watch. One of those ones where you are jumping again. If you're jumping up and down and shouting in the room on your own when you're on the couch, it means you've got an absolute belter, doesn't it, Ali? But I was going to say, the other aspect of it is you looked at last week's game and you thought, there's no way they can replicate that. 18 minutes into it, I'm thinking, I really enjoy watching it, but there's no goals. This is rubbish. And then boom, the whole place explodes.
I thought it was brilliant. 13 goals in a Champions League semi-final. How many semi-finals have you watched? They're cagey, tense, boring. You know, neither team wanting to lose it. I thought it was the antithesis of that, the whole tie. I thought it was brilliant. Just great entertainment.
Yeah.
Just when you watch it, both teams wanting to win it, committed to attack, going for it. Really exciting individual players too.
The other thing I was going to say, Gordon, I wonder if, you know, as well as giving great credit to the players, I wonder if we should give great credit to coaches and coaches in general in the Champions League format, the new format, because the format itself has delivered some really good matches. Does Hansi Flick and Inzaghi deserve credit because of the way they approached the game? Because as Alison mentioned there, I've seen some semi-finals and they've been absolute dirge.
I think the game's evolved recently, and I think the approach from top elite managers is now about entertainment, and it is about playing with wing backs forward, certainly with wingers, and the emphasis is to go and attack now, and attack with, you're talking about top level players with great abilities and creative sparks and real top notch strikers, and I think that's why you're getting these kind of absolute extravaganza games. You're right, I think there has been a recent,
I think so as well.
I mean, look at the top end now. You're looking at attacking sides.
Look at Flick as well. Flick just wanted to play the game in this sort of 30-yard sort of kind of bit in the middle of the field where he's pushing his players right up. People say, oh, the ball's changing a lot, but it is. If you play, it was like playing an 11-a-side game in a 5-a-side court because the game was so compressed, and that gives obviously room at the back.
That's a template that was laid down by Manchester City when they were supreme, and I think top clubs realised quickly they're going to have to try and replicate that, and it's about pressing quickly, getting the ball back and playing in the final third rather than laboured passing, strategic defensive. I think Man City, when they were at their best, flew the flag for that.
Yeah, you say Man City, I say Barcelona.
I think the game's evolved for that tiki-taka kind of Barcelona style. I think it's more dynamic, and I think the ball goes forward faster now.
Yeah. The one thing that I did enjoy about it, it always helps with these situations, Alison, is to be able to play that game, you have to have good players, and you have to have good players that have got a licence to say, listen, on you go.
I was just about to say, it's not just about having good players, it's about trusting your players. I think that's what was evident last night. It's two coaches that trust the players, trust the system, and gave them a freedom to play. It wasn't constrained or strangled by a tactical approach. I'm not saying there wasn't a tactical setup, but there was a freedom given to both sets of players that made for that.
Alison, don't you think the difference, though, we're talking about Barcelona, it was possession, and it was changing angles of attack. It was about
walking it into.
It was about strangling teams with the ball, making them work. The difference is now the teams that are doing well are the ones that go and have wide players that go and commit.
Yeah.
And it's a more dynamic, kind of fluid forward motion rather than turning the game around, switching the ball. It's more
It's a bit more direct as well. It's more.
The more you see it now as well is like if you look at it, everybody's an athlete now. Every player is an athlete, and every player is also technically good. And people say, "Oh, they were always but sometimes you used to have big centre halves that just had to pass the ball to the pivot in front of them, one ahead or pass the ball to somebody could do it. And sometimes you had guys that weren't fit. You had your Hoddles and your Letizzies, people, sublime footballers that people could run over. But you don't have that now. Everybody is.
But what has changed PSG from that kind of perennial kind of knockout quarterfinals to actually a potential winner? It's the fact they've got guys that will go wide and eliminate players. That's the difference for me. It's more authentic attacking football rather than just technical players that keep the ball. They're actually going for the jugular more. Yeah,
well, I was going to buy into that part because quite simply last night you've got a guy, I think he was 37 years of age in a Serbia, scoring, and he was in an unusual position because quite simply the manager had said, listen, we're going out here. Let's get into the box, let's go and threaten. Well. It's a great finish for a centre half, wasn't it? It was fantastic. But overall, I think is the winner in that section or is the winner in the other section?
I think the winner's in the other section. I hope the winner's in the other section as well.
But from a PSG point of view?
I'd like PSG on it.
It's ironic that they could...
I'd like PSG on it.
Would you? Yeah, it's ironic that they could win it without three of the world's greatest players on their side.
Isn't that an interesting point? You wonder sometimes when there's too many big players within one team, if you're maybe trying too hard to keep certain players happy and fit them into your system rather than have a system that fits into the strengths of the
three
players that you've
players
got.
Now you could say are much more effective than Messi, Mbappe and Neymar. Isn't that a shocking statement?
I know.
But I'm talking about effective.
But we've been there before because in 2002 a really good Real Madrid side beat Bayer Leverkusen, and then in 2003 they added the Galacticos and it just became a circus for Real Madrid.
Yep, but it shows again. It's all about building a blend. The reason I want PSG is because they made that dramatic pivot, and that must have been taking a lot of cojones to say no. See this thing that we're built on over the years, having their Galacticos. We're ripping that up. But the other thing about is their coach. I would like to. I like their coach. I've interviewed him in a mass. I'm not talking about in a mass setting.
Yeah.
And I like the cut.
Sure, there's a work ethic.
There's
a collective work ethic that they've got now that they didn't have before. And again, back to your Real point, it's probably the same. That self-indulgent footballer doesn't fit into that collective. You need now to have, allied with the technical brilliance, that desire to go and work for the team. I remember watching PSG and you had Messi wandering about waiting for the ball, Neymar the same, Mbappe the same. So when you take that kind of work ethic out of the team, you fail.
Yeah, well, I hope that is not the same for every team because obviously there's not a great work ethic in Dukla Pumferson, the team I'm playing for, Hugh. It's quite a lazy.
It's quite a high press.
That can only be for the shirts because it's certainly not for the way we play.
Peter, there's water carriers, right, and there's guys that will go and deliver for you.
Yeah.
If the cap fits.
Absolutely. This is
You don't
great
sell the
stuff.
jerseys for one of
It
the
says that all the time.
Listen, I could absolutely sit down and write a book on the times I've looked at him. I've thought, bloody hell, man. I mean, honestly, such talent just wasted, squandered. He could write a great book, couldn't he?
I was full time for 10 years and spent my entire career chasing fullbacks, right? Shutting down fullbacks, busting a gut, right? I'm entitled now in my later years to go and play.
Yes.
Without having to run about and all that carry on.
Thank the Lord there's a
Somebody like him in your ear.
Thank the Lord there's a reason for it. I was searching my head thinking, how can this guy continually throw us under a bus? But nevertheless, absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
By the way, I usually keep the top 10 to the last of our programme, but obviously bearing in mind the fact that I watched Lamine Yamal, and boy did they stick 2 or 3 players on him to try and thwart him.
Doubling up on him all the time, sometimes trebling up. I thought he was outrageous.
Yes, I mean,
Absolutely.
he
17.
He played one with his toe, just toe pulled over to the far side for Lewandowski, and I thought to myself, it's just magical to watch. But of that top 10, I'm going to give you 10 that I think are the new emerging players. Now, I might be slightly controversial here. While I love him at 17, and no, I'm not dismissing all his qualities. I'm enjoying all his qualities, but he's not a Messi, and he's certainly not a Ronaldo. They were a once-in-a-generation joy to watch, and they were battering in stats that were just freakish. Season in, season
His
out.
stats are better at 17 than Messi's.
I was just about to
Yeah,
say.
I know that, and I say to myself, listen, if that boy goes on every season to suddenly go, by the way, I've scored 40 this season, I've scored 50, I've won 5 Ballon d'Ors, and I've won numerous Champions Leagues.
I get your point.
Then roll on. We are in for a brilliant 10 or 15 years. But I've got him in there, and I'm looking at the new generation, and I'm saying to myself, we've watched some great football, so let's look at the players that excite us now. And I've picked 10 that I think, oh yeah, I like watching them. They're really good. Somebody will come up with somebody who's a better player, undoubtedly younger, and maybe in the South American game, because I think sometimes in Europe we're very insular. Yamal, Mbappe, Bellingham, Vinicius Junior, Rafinha, Ousmane Dembele at PSG, Musiala at Bayern Munich, Cole Palmer, Saka, and Pedri.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the young Hungarian
is it?
midfielder that plays for Real Madrid? You know the one?
No. I'm gone, but I will look it up. Yeah,
I would add Cava of PSG to that.
Yeah.
He's 24. I would see, if I had a couple of PSG players, I think Hakimi, I was watching Dumfries last night, and so that made, I thought Hakimi was the best fullback in the world, so I saw how Dumfries played last night, and maybe joint number 1. And I love Vitinha. Vitinha's not a guy that gets you off your seat, but I just think in that midfield role, just pick and go. Like Deschamps, like that water carrier, but at a different level. I love watching these kind of players. That's a decent list, Peter.
It's not a bad list. I mean, there's some people that will come up with others. I just quickly thought to myself, I'll come up with 10. I'm looking for your Hungarian Partey from the Real Madrid, and for the life of me, I can't see. Is this somebody that maybe you had thought of from many years ago in a video you've watched, and you don't realise he's moved on or retired? I can't see a Hungarian.
Listen, I haven't just turned 70.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw me under the bus.
Yeah, I don't see a Hungarian in that side.
Who's the boy that plays in the middle of the park? Is it Hungary he plays with?
Yeah, do you know what this reminds me of, by the way? This reminds me of Ruffy, who fires out a line, and then it's the complete polar opposite of where we're going with it. So I don't know who the guy he's on about, but that's your competition this week on the Journos. Who's the Hungarian that Partey's talking about that could end up being a German international?
And you win that chocolate cake.
Yes, exactly.
And a seat in the couch.
Yeah. So, by the way, any others that I've missed that you might want to? No, I think I've got a fairly comprehensive list there. By the way, as far as Real Madrid's concerned, has he got the name?
Gula.
Abdul Gula. I've got the nationality wrong, though, but that's just...
Yeah, well, just a
Minor details.
just a minor technicality on him.
Turkey.
Yes, yep, which is really close to. It's really close.
All part of the Ottoman Empire at one time.
Same political structure.
The
I think it's a 45-minute flight, Hugh, to get there.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire has collapsed in the wake of the First World War, as Gordon well knows. Gullar was part of.
Sorry, Hungary, soon to be Turkey.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, you rate him.
I think he's fantastic again. About just that old head
He's a good player.
and young shoulders, keeps the ball.
Okay, listen, there's always fallout. We're going to talk about Hearts shortly as well. We'll talk about some of the awards from the PFA Scotland Old Firm fallout. It always usually, Monday and Tuesday's conspiracy and slaughtering everybody. Wednesday you start to take a more balanced view of some of the questions that will come out of it. And I think, as far as players are concerned, there are so many things that emerged from Celtic and Rangers games. I thought it was fairly flat, but of the questions that emerged, I listened to the interview with Cyril Dessers, and he said, "Listen, if somebody had said at the start of the whole campaign, I'm going to be here for 2 seasons, I'm going to score 47 goals, I'd be pretty happy." And I thought it was a good point by the lad. I like him on an interview basis. I have no insight to him. I have no pals with him. I just think at the end of the day, maybe he doesn't score enough big goals. Maybe he's missed too many, that 47 should be 67 goals. But he's certainly divisive. And I don't know, maybe is there another manager who comes in and suddenly gets the best out of him? No.
He can flatter himself all he wants, but again, your eyes don't betray you. You need to be the guy, if you're the guy at Celtic or Rangers and charged with that responsibility. There's been moments during Rangers' seasons, the past two seasons, that he's been so wasteful that it's hurting the team to a degree that you can't go again with him. Enough's enough. I was at the St Mirren Rangers game 2 weeks ago, and again he missed 2 absolute sitters before he finally scored. Your ratio has to be better than that.
You say enough's enough, it's time to sell him.
Again, who's coming out to buy him for the money that Rangers are wanting? You don't go to games with blindfolds on. You look at what you see. His link-up play has improved. He does score goals, but he doesn't score them in the chances he's getting. So once he misses, it's too critical for Rangers at this point in time to go with failed projects. And Cyril Dessers might compliment himself on his strike rate, which is impressive to a degree, but it's camouflaged by the fact that he's been part of a massive failure. Yeah.
The only drawback, Alison, is, as Gordon said there, is yes, there's always a buyer for people who score 47 goals in 2 seasons, but it's whether that fee matches the evaluation in Rangers' mind, which at the moment I think might be slightly higher than what some people are willing to pay.
Yeah, I think there were a number of clubs in January, according to the player himself. I think... Yeah, I take your point about where they are in commanding a fee and what they want for it. But I think Gordon's right. I think if it's a clean slate and new owners coming in, I just don't think he's been clinical enough. And I think the big problem at Rangers has not been selling players at the right time. I think if the stats are good and impressive, you go and you get the highest fee you can probably get and then move on from it.
Big problem's his wages.
He's
moving on.
Yeah.
Because the money is on, the kind of clubs that will come in for him will not be wanting to pay in excess of £1 million a year in wages for him. The big problem, the figure that matters is not 47 goals in 2 years. The figure that matters is one trophy, one domestic trophy in 2 years. If he'd scored 47 goals and Rangers were on course for Rangers had won the league last year and on course for a treble this year, everyone would be fine with him. The fact of the matter is...
We'd be fighting over him.
The fact of the matter is they've won 1 trophy out of 6 and everybody's looking at the reasons why that is.
I have to say though, if you're talking about valuation, he sold himself in Europe. I thought it was excellent.
He's an instinctive striker.
He is. If you give him time to think about it, there's a problem. I thought in Europe, the way that he led the line...
Well, Old Trafford as well.
Fantastic. So I compliment him for that.
I think there'll be suitors in the summer.
I think there will. It's just whether or not...
Your body of work has to be more impressive, right?
Listen, I've seen players command a fee who you wonder how the hell they managed to sign them, or anybody was willing to buy the person, because you couldn't see anything, and then they take a chance. Listen, the best example is that Manchester United have a track record which is unparalleled, and certainly nobody can compete with them in buying flops.
Yeah,
so there's always clubs that will buy somebody you think is not top drawer, lesser than top drawer.
Take the Kyogo argument. He's now struggling to get it around. And you transfer that form that he's got in Scotland over at the French league.
He joined the wrong
Sometimes
club.
the environment.
He joined the club, and the manager gets sacked 2 games later.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's circumstantial thing that allow players to click, ignite, or go the opposite way.
Yeah, Ida, 19 goals. I'm not going to get down the road of, well, is he a £9 million player or not? They overpaid for him.
Absolutely.
But again, if we're arguing over the Dessers point, Ida comes into that category. Young boy, like Dessers, there's room for improvement in lots of areas. I'm not seeing it at the moment. I'll tell you another thing about it. You can always tell this, Hugh, whether it's Ida or Engels or Czerny or Dessers. See, when you start getting 3 or 4 people all commenting on it in the press, ex-players, everybody's got a view on it. And the reason they've all been asked for a view is because, as Gordon mentioned, your eyes don't deceive you. The general consensus is, OK, he scored 19 goals, but he's not impressed.
I know, but the 2 things he's got going for him is that he's a manager's player. So he's going to get a lot more leeway than the managers put. This is not quite the record signing, but it was a record signing before Engels came in. And Brendan, not even a year ago, Brendan Rodgers sat down post-Scottish Cup final and said, this is my man, this is the man I want, etc., etc.
This is the man I'm going to play regularly off the bench.
His touch to manipulate the ball into an area to go and finish on Sunday, it was fantastic.
Well, he scores,
and I didn't think he had that in his locker.
That's the second point I'm going to make. One, the manager. The second thing is about Ida. Unlike Dessers, has got a habit of scoring big goals in big games.
Yeah.
See, if you actually put his highlight reel up, I mean, we all know how deceptive highlight reels could be. But if you just in memory go back the goal, scores a winner in a Scottish Cup final, scores 2 in the Champions League down at Aston Villa. He scored a couple of times at Ibrox. Last year as well, he was instrumental in coming off the bench and getting Celtic over the line. I think at Motherwell once. He scored big goals. I think he's. I think it'll be interesting what happens in the summer, because Celtic have to, for a variety of reasons, have to bolster the front 3. And I'm just wondering where the money will go on that. Will they get another top centre forward? Certainly, they desperately need another winger.
I get that point. But you only have to, if you don't listen to what a manager has to say, you certainly have to look at the decisions he makes. And this is a man that they've paid £9 million for. He's young, can get better. I'll give him that. But he's not playing him.
Yeah, I think that tells you everything. I think the fact that even when Kyogo went, I think everyone anticipated then that he would be the guy that took the jersey. Instead, obviously, moved Maeda through the middle. I think that does tell you everything. I think
Alison, you can't ignore the valuation. The repertoire that he's got in his locker isn't enough for the value that they've paid for him, clearly, right?
Yeah, I think that's a club failing. I think when you brought him in on loan last January, the first thing you should be doing is saying, here's the clause. Here's what we're willing to pay. If we want to go ahead and sign him, we put a clause in for.
Everybody can see he's one-dimensional. He has to grow in that Celtic jersey, but he has to add more.
Yeah, just on that point, and this is the big dilemma for every club when it gets to the summer and how much they're going to spend. I tend to dismiss at the moment a lot of the articles written about here comes the impending takeover at Rangers, because I think a lot of it is just being fed to people who gleefully write whatever comes out of Ibrox. But as far as any takeover that does materialise, suddenly you're saying, will they be able to spend millions upon millions that everybody thinks is going to happen? And the answer is emphatically no, Hugh.
Well, there's certain constraints on it we know about. There's legal constraints with UEFA, with the financial fair play. I think, though, if you were sitting in a Celtic boardroom, you would be looking across the river and you'd be saying to yourself, and these are intelligent people, you know, they've dominated Scottish football for all of this century while making tens of millions of pounds. I'd be looking across the road and saying, I think they might be getting their act together.
Yeah.
Because the people that are coming in, can you be sure? No. But I'm pretty certain they'll not be splashing huge cash.
Yeah.
But they'll be splashing cash, and they'll be splashing cash on a strategy, not on, you know, or the manager likes these three guys, get them. No. This is the figures, this is what they can give us, this is analytics, this is what we need. They'll be sitting down.
There'll also be an infrastructure put in place that starts to build for a long-term vision, not just in immediate stopgaps of let's bring in X, Y and Z.
And they've got a massive problem, as Hugh said, like Odessa's. Who's moving on when they're getting money they're never going to get elsewhere? So unless they're coming in to compensate and clear out, that's going to cost a fortune.
I think that due diligence is where, you know, as well as the due diligence and looking at the infrastructure that Alison's talking about and saying, okay, we're going to have to spend this on the stadium, we're going to have to try and take out some of the players that are not good enough, then we're going to have to recruit. We've obviously got to get the right manager as well, and then understand what it's going to take to try and flip this quickly to get the rewards of maybe a Champions League group stage. So all of that is in the equation that they're going to have to assess, as well as we say that whether it's Rangers or Celtic, you can't spend willy-nilly because of what Hugh mentioned, which is financial fair play.
Graham Souness has quoted a figure of £50 million for Rangers' injection to compete, and that's purely on the budget for players. It's fantasy island. There's absolutely no way that they're going to get anywhere close to that kind of injection for recruitment. Everybody knows that, but Rangers fans should maybe temper the fact that, as you say, structures and building long term is where the money should be invested, because there's not enough money to change things quickly at Rangers.
And with that, the flip side for Celtic is this potentially his final year where Brendan Rodgers turns around and said, listen, I need the 4 or 5 players that I was talking about for that final push to where my remit on this contract is fulfilled, which is give me 3 or 4 or 5 players of genuine quality so that we can go beyond a Bayern Munich? Or is that pie in the sky?
I think it would be very, very difficult, given, you know, remember, what was it, 26 million they spent? You know, I know they got a lot of money in, but, you know, they bought back Jota for 8, they bought Trusty for 6, they bought Ida for 9, Engels for 11.
Yeah. How difficult will it be to sell that point that you're making, Hugh, on the basis that probably in the summer, if they don't announce they've got 100 million in the bank, I'll be gobsmacked?
Yeah, I know, but I just think, like strategically, I think, will they go again like that? I very much doubt it.
Yeah.
And I think
smaller amounts?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that it'll be Brendan Rodgers last year, because I think he'll look at. I think as well as there's a tenure for managers at Celtic and Rangers, and I think it's a very difficult job. I know we throw Brendan Rodgers' wife into the mix because she apparently loves living in Glasgow. So that is always, you know, as somebody said at the PFA the other day, there, happy wife, happy life. You know, if your family's happy in a place, etc., etc. But I think another year would probably be enough.
Do you not think his comments last week were quite telling? The fact that he didn't entertain any notion that he was anything other than completely focused. But for Brendan Rodgers, lock yourself in for one more year and you've done your time.
Yeah. And then he can walk a bit.
Without drama.
People say, well, where'll we go? There'll be a job in La Liga for him, and there's a job in Saudi for him.
Yeah, okay. Brendan, if you're listening, there's the strategy. This is what you have to do. But just one little downside to it all, and there's always a downside to a Celtic Rangers game, a Rangers Celtic game, and that is basically the conduct of people that you never really want to spend any time with in your life. Even if you walked down the middle of Buchanan Street, you would be walking in a different world from what I call our people who have no morals, no values, no principles, and basically will do anything to tarnish the name of a club because of their own conduct, because of the way they conduct their life, whether it be through sectarianism, bigotry, you name it. I think Rangers let themselves down with the banner thing. I think they should have had a tighter grip on the banner, because there's a group of fans who just basically will put anything up that, you know, is poor taste. And by the way, it's poor taste, and I'm watching and right across a lot of social media where they're now selling T-shirts and mugs with the banner on it to appeal to a percentage of fans who like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the fallout for me, and the really most interesting part of the fallout for me, because usually it's all tedious, you know, I think for me the banner's tedious, but throwing bottles onto the parts, tedious, guys celebrating the death of fans in a tragic accent is just tedious.
I was about to get to that.
It's just awful stuff, and it happens, and there's not that much we can say about it, because we just say, you know, what's happening. I think the really interesting thing politically for me was Rangers putting out a statement about the banner, and the way they put the statement out. And this follows with a very strong statement about Rangers club, you know, football clubs for everybody. If you don't fancy it, on your bike. Now that's gained a lot of traction, and I know the fans board were talking about that last night, and I'll be interested to look at the minutes from that. I mean, because they talked about it last night. We've had a robust discussion about this. My take on this, and I haven't got it for anybody else, but my instinctive take on this is that this new board is coming in, and Patrick Stewart, of course, has released his statement. But I think it would be naive to suggest he's not had a word with the potential owners over this, or they've not had a word with us. And I think this might be the biggest cultural sea change. I think this might be the story, that the board are coming in and just saying, we are not putting up with this.
It's a really heavy-handed, unambiguous approach. Heavy
statement. I've never seen a Rangers statement like that before. And I'm just, this board, and it wouldn't be a surprise, because you remember Fenway Group at Liverpool. Remember the Evra controversy with Suarez? Yes. Kenny and his players came out and warm up with a wee back Evra, whatever it was. And the very next day, Fenway said, no, we don't. No, we don't, Kenny. Yeah. No, we don't, players. If you ever wear anything like that again, it's disciplinary. Yeah. We don't support that.
I'll tell you, I share your view on the group and where they might be strong-willed, resolute on the way they want to conduct themselves. I think it would take a heck of a long time to cull, a group of people who think all that is acceptable. I think if you start cutting them out, if you start cutting that bad apple out of a support, then suddenly you say to yourself, wait a minute, you know, that's a large chunk of people who are buying merchandise, who are coming to games, and they'll say, this is our tradition, we want to be singing your songs, we want to be doing things that annoy the life out of our opposition.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have that resistance. I thought the interesting thing yesterday, after all the hullabaloo about the banner, the statement, the police inquiry, and then of course there are no charges brought, was the reaction then, people saying, well, there you go, that's a lesson for you, Patrick Stewart. That was the prevailing feeling amongst the Rangers support, that they weren't happy about the statement, and they weren't happy at the inherent criticism that came in the back of it towards that element of the support. But for me, I think over the last month, you've had two very, very strong statements that have been utterly condemning that kind of mentality, that kind of core belief. But they've not just condemned it. What they've said is, we don't want to be a club for you. This is not. And it is. Listen, you're going to have to try and steer a ship that stood for certain values and certain cultural aspects for over a century. It's not an easy fix. But this is the very first time you've had a club come in, and you've had the board come in and say, we're not standing for it. We're disassociating ourselves. We wish to move away. We do not want this club to be representative of the values that you're projecting.
But that cultural change is a generational one. There's an underbelly at a lot of football clubs, certainly Rangers to a certain degree, and it typify a kind of, they trade on certain unacceptable values, and that's a generational thing. and that's not going to shift quickly. And we're kidding ourselves what you think it's a minority, because it's not. We all listen to the songs that were sung at the weekend. Not acceptable, but are acceptable because they're obviously still getting sung.
But what's interesting is it's the first time you have the club come out and say, we do not welcome it. We don't want it.
But
You're
there is
not
a
just paying
trading
lip
value,
service to
right?
it, you're actually coming out and saying, no.
Right.
When can you ever recall any of that? I can't, in my...
It's an unspoken word, though, about the values of certain Rangers fans. And it's a very controversial kind of hot topic. I don't know if I'm prepared to get into it to that kind of depth, but it is cultural, generational, and it is an underbelly. And to shift that underbelly, it's going to take a generation to do that.
But I think their point of view, and whether people might say there's an innocence to this, or there's like their point of view would be, we do not want to change the fans. We just don't want them in the ground.
Yeah.
If you are like that, we're not wanting to change your opinions. We don't want to change what you do in your private life. What we do want is, we don't want you. They've said this. We don't want you in the
But Hugh, bigotry drives an economic aspect of the old firm rivalry, and it's sold on that to a degree. And to deny that is not to confront it truthfully.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, listen, I understand where you're coming from with statements, but with all due respect, you know, whether it's governments, whether it's dealing with sport, whether it's football, whether it's integrity, I've heard lots of really strong statements before in my life.
I've not either.
No, not from... Not,
I thought it was... Do you know what? Yeah, I thought it was kind of reminiscent of the Fergus McCann thing at Celtic, the boys against bigotry.
Yeah.
Like, and he got a lot of flack and a lot of criticism for that too. I thought it felt very reminiscent of a new broom coming in and saying, wait a wee minute, we're part of a much wider commercial world. We don't want to be tainted by any associations that impact us negatively as a business.
No, nobody's debating the integrity of the statement. What Gordon's pointed out, which I believe is difficult, is they're trying to cure the ills of a society in this country, which is acceptable for that type of behaviour.
That's the point. I don't think they're trying to cure the ills of anybody. I think they're trying to say is, you can have that,
but not here.
But not in here.
Yeah, I agree.
I accept the integrity of the statement.
Reputational damage is real, right? Reputational damage is real. If the investment is sizable, they're taking a big gamble, because I don't think that you can address the classroom and say, this is how we have to behave if you want to be here and all that. It just doesn't work at a club like Glasgow Rangers.
Well, I think if you've I think if you've played second fiddle to Celtic for the best part of a quarter of a century, and somebody's coming in and saying, hang on a minute, we're bringing in money, investment, we can change the landscape of what happens on the pitch, which is ultimately the most important thing that you want to see, then there's a certain way that you have to go. You have to come with us, or you have to leave.
Listen, I embrace the integrity of the statement. I think the jury's out until we see whether the actual practical part of this, to cut out that rotten apple, and how much of that rotten apple needs to be cut out. And on the other side, I'm not going to miss this, to see someone mock the death of 66 fans, I think he's lost his job as well. It's just, I mean, it just tells you everything you need to know about certain individuals. That whole picture of that gentleman mocking the death of 66 Rangers fans, it just fills you.
The lowest common denominator is allowed access to a football ground, as you saw at the Aberdeen St Mirren game at the weekend.
Yes.
A disgusting, repulsive incident with a handicapped fan. So you're going to get absolutely the scourge of society doing these things.
Yeah.
Rangers don't want to be tainted with their element, as every football club has an element of it. But the problem that they have to address, if they're the new broom, do they banish? Or do they have to tolerate? They have to make a big decision in this.
I think it will become a culture of condemnation. Every time you have something that raises its head, it will be, we do not want to be this to be part of our club. We don't want it. We're asking you to leave it.
The Rangers one at the weekend was a collective, which we're all addressing at the moment. The individual who come in with the 66 Hugh beggars belief. Where in your life can you be brought up to think that's acceptable?
But football never fails to astonish you for that. I mean, you have chants now about people dying, and you have it never. I mean, no matter how low it goes, there's always seems
Another flaw.
And you see it, and it's not just a Glasgow problem, although, you know, it was most obvious in Glasgow, but Manchester United and Liverpool trade awful stuff. It's like, I think in many ways it's like a wee boy thing. It's like and it is a masculine thing, about how bad can I be? How low can I go? How low can I go and show how hardcore I am in this? About people dying in stairways, about people dying inside football grounds, about football players dying in crashes, about football players dying of natural causes. And it's this kind of thing. It's a very, very weird thing, and it's almost like a showing off ego thing. This is how hard I am. I can go really low, and the only way out of that is quite simple in football grounds now as well with CCTV, is identifying ban.
So that goes back to that's the question. What do? Do you tolerate, put out statements, or do you banish?
You've got to banish.
Because the only way to actually have a real ground shift and set in place the journey towards a culture shift is to tell them they're not wanted and actually act on it.
Yep.
I actually thought if you go back and you look at that boys against bigotry thing from Fergus McCann, I think it did change elements within the Celtic support. Now, it's never eradicated it. If you go to an away game, it's a very different experience and a very different song sheet from what you would get at Celtic Park. But I think at Celtic Park, it definitely became much more sanitised than what it ever had been before. There was a shift. There was conversations about it. There were conversations about it.
Just before we talk about Hugh's cake, which is sitting there resplendent to celebrate the 70th, Hearts, forefront, Tony Bloom has looked to possibly just £10 million investment, although if you read Barry Anderson, he said it's £9.86 million. Well done, Barry, for being so specific on these things.
1.14 is quite a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cent and a half. But the good thing about Barry is he's in there. He's a journalist who will be at the heart of it, if you'll excuse the pun. The minority shareholding would be 29%. 8,000 Foundation of Hearts members will now vote yea or nay on by May 26th. So he's got an involvement in Brighton and Union Saint-Gilloise. And now he's serious about Hearts. So, sorry Alison, I keep kicking you. But
metaphorically as much as anything else.
Yes, absolutely. If this is a podcast, people are wondering what is happening in that studio. But he's serious about it. He's putting his money where his mouth is. And this looks as if it could be something good for Hearts. Is it good for Hearts? And is it a trend in Scottish football that could be positive?
One, it is a trend. I mean, Scottish football is obviously attracting interest. And it's attracting interest because particularly American, but overseas buyers are seeing it as undervalued. Particularly undervalued in the sense that if there is a shake-up in Europe, you know, the Scottish brands will go. I mean, if there's a shake-up in Europe, for example, for a European league, can you imagine how much more attractive Scottish clubs from Celtic, Rangers and into Hearts would be? So there's a slight gamble in that. But I also think they're genuinely undervalued anyway. I mean, because if you say about Hearts, if you buy Brighton, for example, and you're paying an awful lot of money for that, you probably say to yourself things like European football isn't a guaranteed. But if you buy Hearts, you can actually say to yourself, and I know this season they're not, but you could say to yourself, like, European will go, if you buy Hearts, you say we have a season ticket book which is basically sell out, and we have guaranteed European football every year, or should have guaranteed football. So it's already an attractive buy. I think the problem is, and I think it'll be interesting, is that some Hearts supporters whom I know are not sold in this at all.
Wow.
They are
within the members, because the Foundation of Hearts quotes that I've read is
very supportive.
Very supportive.
They're sort of influential voices of businessmen and that I know, and I talked to last night about this because I was kind of surprised that I'd heard there was some dissent. So this is welcome to my life at 70 years old, making check calls in Hearts at 6:30 at night. But anyway, I talked to them, and they had genuine concerns because they want it to remain a fan-owned club, but you will under this circumstance.
Yeah.
They want it to be increased as a fan-owned club. You know, they see it as a process of being completely fan-owned. They've got some suspicions, as everybody has, of people coming in. So I think it'll pass, because
Yes.
I think most people will look at this and say, oh my goodness, we're getting 9.86 million, and we're getting a guy who knows what the football is about, who's got obvious interest in other clubs. I think it'll go through, but there are dissenting voices.
The only thing about that, and I know you're usually controversial when you come on the show, Partick, but from my point of view, I don't buy into this. I think there's a ceiling point with, a high percentage of fan-owned clubs.
Yeah, that's true.
Because James Anderson and Anne Budge and a number of wealthy people have all had to dip their hand in their pocket, where fans would have been going, oh, wait a minute, you're asking us? We're already paying your subscription per month, but we want good players in the park, but we want to beat Hibs. Do you know what I mean? I think there's a ceiling point for it.
Well, ceiling point seems to be the comment that's made about Hearts and Hibs consistently. How many times have you interviewed a manager and asked the question, when do you go through that ceiling? If you're speculating across the Scottish game, Hearts are a prime club. The stadium's fantastic. They're going to get the hotel there. It's in the capital. It's got real, proper football, big-time club potential. The only way to get through the ceiling is financial. So Hearts fans need to just accept it. Will this make enough of an impact? It could. But how many times, Alison, have you interviewed Hearts and Hibs players, Hugh? And the question about the glass ceiling and separating the old firm always was one that causes them to shriek. If Hearts want to take that extra step, and it is the club, I think, that Hibs as well, clearly they've got the money coming in as well, but Hearts are a prime football club to be that project club to try and do that.
Yeah.
And it will require money that the fans can't accrue. It needs to come in from an independent body, and I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, and we talked about the 49ers and Rangers, the Black Knights at Hibernian, Tony Bloom suddenly at Hearts. Could this be a trend that suddenly maybe stimulates our game outside money and a different approach and a different viewpoint to marketing, to just to trying to take a club to a level that they haven't reached before?
I think it's just a new unexplored avenue. I think you see the success that they've had with it, with the stats-based background and the impact that it can have when it comes to your recruitment, when it comes to bringing in players that fit the mould of how I was going to say, it's not even how the manager wants to play, it'll be how the club wishes to play, the identity of the club and which players fit into that system. I think it's interesting. I think I certainly think it's something that clubs would do well, I think, to explore.
Just as a footnote, they're still looking for a manager. Ryan Stevens and a number of people are saying, Derek McInnes, go and give him the job. And I look and I say to myself, how can a man that wins manager of the year 3 times and plays attractive football with Falkirk, albeit it was nervy at the end, but I wonder why he's not really at the forefront. And John McGlynn, is it 63 and doesn't have a tan and a side parting?
No. I hear one of the talking about somebody that doesn't have a tan or a side.
That's why I thought you were better placed than most.
The thing that baffles me a wee bit about Hearts is I know they're going to talk to him. Well, I've heard they're going to actually talk to McGlynn. How seriously they're going to talk to him, I don't know, but I heard that they're going to talk to him by the end of the week. The thing about Hearts is that if you have a strategy, and at the beginning of the season when Steve Naismith went and had to get a manager, and they said, this is our strategy, this is our strategy for hiring a manager. Then 6 months later, they're saying, well, this isn't our strategy for hiring a manager anymore. That gets alarm bells going in my head, because Derek McInnes, Stephen Robinson and John McGlynn were all there, 6 months ago.
Yes.
And there wasn't a peep about them. So why is there a peep about them now? And if I was a strategic thinker in the boardroom, if I was, for instance, a James Anderson, I would say, wait a wee minute here, what is the strategy?
Yeah.
Because if the strategy is that, why didn't we do it 6 months ago?
Well, sometimes, and football is a strange old game where sometimes the blind can lead the blind.
It's funny you say that.
You walk into a room with somebody who said, listen, I have these tablets of stone, and this is the light, the way and the truth. And they all jump in and go, well, we're going to embrace it.
Nail on head, 100% the problem at Hearts is just what you actually said. Forget John can go through and meet them. This computer's going to give you the next manager, because you've got Graham Jones and Andrew McKinley who are not only bought into it, they're contained within that whole project now. Graham Jones is a sports scientist. Not to my knowledge a great football mind or a contact-based guy. More into his squash. Andrew McKinley's just come in for the golf world. The greatest will in the world at Hearts lacks professional football acumen, I believe, in the boardroom. And that's a concern, I think. I think the computer's going to give you another manager, because they have their hook, line and sinker with it.
Yeah. Listen, we've almost reached the end of the programme. Great, as ever. Forthright in our opinions. But I've got to say, a little cake there, 70 years of age.
Is that what we go like that?
You might not know this, Alison, but with PLZ Soccer over the years, right at the very start, I realised I needed a sane voice in the room alongside Ruffy, and we got the legend. The problem I had, even by bringing on the legend, and that's that experience of a 70-year-old, is in the first couple of years, even a programme like the Journos would not have survived without him taking it down the road and giving us a Bobby Murdoch story. And then I eventually had to intervene and say, listen, Hugh, we're talking about fans and their conduct inside a stadium. What the hell has that got to do with Bobby Murdoch? So it's been a joy over the years. But 70, Hugh, magnificent. And by the way, I know you didn't get into the football journalism aspect of it until maybe the last decade. But prior to that, huge football fan, you've seen some right good players and some right good games.
8 different decades I've watched football in. 8 different decades.
Oh.
From the 1950s right through to the 2020s.
Yeah, would Bobby Murdoch have survived in today's game?
Aye.
Yeah.
Yeah, good players would always be good players, I think. I think one of the great things about it is, like, there's a lot of things. See, when I was growing up and then I was in the Herald, and it was like the very much the middle class player and that football was kind of looked down upon,
At the Herald?
Yeah. It was. Like, I was in what they call the back bench, so I was the chief sub-editor, so you talked about education policies, economic stuff and that, and if you mentioned the word football, I was like, how oiky. But last night, for the millionth time last night, I was sitting on my own in my cup of tea watching a game of football, and just went, my God, I love.
Do you know what? Can I tell a wee story about Hugh?
Yes.
Before we came on air, he sat there and he gave a narration to the young staff that are in here. And you spoke about life lessons, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was really touching to hear you impart your knowledge, and what he actually said was quite poignant, right? But do you know what you are? Proof. You don't have to be cynical or be infected by the cynical elements of football. You just enjoy it.
Yeah, this reminds me of it was a lovely. Yeah,
I will give you a lift to cut.
Thank you.
It was a lovely line there, but it reminded me of the movie that Robert De Niro was in when he was infected and he didn't have the same optimistic outlook, and that was what was that one where he played Lucifer? It's such a good movie.
No.
Was it no Angel Heart with what's his name? Mickey Rourke. And I was listening to you and I thought, my God, there's somebody in the dark side who actually is looking, thinking, it's too late for me, but you are an array of light.
Yeah, you'd be amazed what I would do if I lived home to Turkey.
Absolutely. Happy birthday to you, Hugh. I know it's past and you spent it with the most important people in life, which is your family. But we certainly view you as our family here at PLZ Soccer, and it's been a joy having you. But 70 years of age, Ali. I hope I'm here. I hope you're sitting talking to you. It's not this new slick presenter who said to you, well, Ali, you're 70 now. It would be great. You can reflect on it.
I hope I'm not working at 70. No. I'm sitting in a beach somewhere at 70.
Well, there's a lot of people who have obviously expressed that wish now for you on our social media, but that's the nature of life nowadays. Listen, it's been a joy. I hope we're going to get a slice of the cake, because obviously obviously he likes to slice it up with the people that mean most to him. And he also gives it to people that he thinks are beyond redemption, which gives me a nice chance to thank Gordon Parks for coming into the studio alongside Hugh McDonald and, of course, Alison McConnell. Don't forget, we've got PLZ Premium. If you want additional content, there's lots of really good stuff coming up on it. You get discounts on our merchandise. You'll also get a chance to go to our events. We've got an evening with Gordon Strachan and Martin O'Neill coming up. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, you can get yourself some tickets and get along to that, which should be brilliant. Clough, Ferguson, Aberdeen, Nottingham Forest and Celtic. What a night that's going to be. Anyway, from all of us here in the Journos, thank you to everyone who listens on the podcast. We really do appreciate your support, and across all our social media. Thanks for listening and watching.